Alka Ganesh. Warm welcome, madam, to Dr. Alka Ganesh, we have got someone who is a pioneer in teaching. She has got a solid 40-year experience in teaching, who has headed the Department of Medicine in CMC Vellore, and she has also obtained the Distinguished Teacher Award from the National Board of Education in 2014. And above all, she has had her geriatric training in Newcastle upon Tyne, UK, and she is also a visiting professor for the Malaysian University. So we have got someone who is a world-renowned person and who is going to enlighten us today. A warm welcome to Dr. Alka Ganesh. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Venkateshan, for that very nice introduction. And it is always a pleasure to communicate with people who are interested in palliative care, in geriatric care, because these are subjects which are not very well, not considered in detail, but are vital to the improvement of our community. So I understand that in this session, we are also going to have a case presentation. And I suppose I would first give my talk and then the case presentation. And I hope I will be able to stay for the entire case presentation because of some time constraints. But certainly I would like to meet with all of you. So should I share the screen now? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay, and so today I'm going to talk about the elderly people and what aspects of discrimination or vulnerability is a very big word to use, do they suffer from? As we know, children and babies, they're extremely vulnerable because they haven't developed yet. They haven't reached their full potential. But when we come to the elderly people, they have reached their full potential, they have plateaued, and now is a stage of degenerative changes and perhaps a decline in health. And due to a combination of all these factors, the elderly are very, very vulnerable to live adequate, dignified lives in the community. So this point is well known to everybody, but nothing much was really done about it in a very official way till 1990, when the world body of the WHO took it upon itself to enunciate certain factors which then can translate into many, many rights of an older person. So in brief, they said 5 rights, which was they should be independent, they should be able to participate, they have entitlement to care, all forms of care, according to their needs. And not only that, they should be able to self-fulfill themselves should they like to. And we'll go into all this in detail. And then, of course, they must be afforded the full dignity of dignity as a person and as a member of society. So if you look at it, this is a sort of a much more elaborate way: right to life, right to liberty, respect for private and family life. So many rights are there. And if you look at it, you will see that some of them don't look quite necessary. For example, number 8, right to education. An elderly person is already educated, but that person may want to have some more education, may want to do a correspondence course, may want to do something else. Just because of age, he should not be discriminated. Of course, when there is technical education, when there is professional education in universities, there's always that exclusion criteria. People should not be above the age of this, should not. That is not what we call as discrimination against the elderly. That is just so that the person who receives that education will have a adequate professional life to use that education. So we're talking here of an older person who's retired and feels, I want to enroll in some course. And so they should be able to. And their standard of living should not deteriorate just because they have aged. And this happens very often because on the meager pensions that people get, they don't really, they have to come down. They were used to certain things, they have to have less. So these are the many rights of an individual, and they do translate into certain actions that have to be taken. It can't just come by itself. And so we're going to talk here today about how do we as a community who care for the elderly ensure that they have these rights. Now, the United Nations has gone a little bit forward this decade. If you actually go and look into what the United Nations and the WHO have done for the elderly, they have done a lot of things, and a lot of change in perception of the elderly has taken place. Now, this decade, the 1920 to 1930, has been designated by the United Nations as the decade of active aging. This whole decade, they are going to work towards how to promote not only the rights of the elderly people, not only the care of the elderly people, but how do you make it convenient or promote the people from aging without degenerating. Now, that's an oxymoron, because we all think of when you age, there is degeneration of our tissues. True. But to the level and to the extent that is possible, can we allow the person to be as healthy as they can by doing specific actions and functions? It doesn't come naturally. So in order to age actively, there are many, many determinants. And this slide actually shows you that health and social services must be geared specifically, just like we are so used to in our country for reproductive health and child health services. So in the same way, the health service for the elderly, and not only the health services, the social services also. So if they are needing support for meals, needing support for care, the community should be able to provide these from the society. And you come here and see the economic determinants, which is self-explanatory. Old age means a decline in income, and that should not be allowed to happen. Without money, one cannot avail of all the facilities that are required for active aging. Social determinants, and this here is what we are going to be dealing a lot with, is the discrimination that is inbuilt, embedded in the way our society functions, because society sees elderly people as no more in the mainstream, which is true, no more able to be productive, which may not be quite true, but they are seen as people who cannot earn an income, cannot contribute productively to society. But this is a challenge because it may not actually be true, and we need a shift in perception towards that part of it in our society. The physical environment, self-explanatory. Is the physical home, is the physical roads, are the roads, the parks, are they conducive to the aging population? Definitely not. We now have nice vitrified tiles in our floors. We are very happy to see these gleaming floors. Previously, we had these, I don't know how many people are in the older age group, but they would see, we only had cement floors. They didn't gleam, you see, and they caught quite a bit of dust. But nowadays, the modern houses, we only want tiles. Are they good for elderly people? No, they slip and fall, and you cannot see the water that's on it. So taking that as an example, there are many, many other aspects, including lighting, handrails, etc., which have to be factored in the physical environment when buildings are built, when roads are constructed, etc. And then, of course, we have personal determinants, behavioral determinants, which affect the active aging. For example, personal determinants. We know that many people, as they age, they get diseases like diabetes and hypertension. And every one of these chronic diseases, plus the habits of the person, did they smoke, did they drink alcohol, did that accelerate their aging process? All these are personal determinants, and they have a very, very important impact on whether the person will age actively in a positive way or in a negative way. And of course, behavioral determinants. Each of us have different personalities, and those who have been, shall we say, popular, those who have been accommodating, those who have been able to mix with other people, accept things, that behavior is a more positive behavior. Whereas people who are always cynical, always complaining in their younger age group may find that that's a barrier to active aging. It should not be, but it is so. So I just want to show a few pictures of elderly people. We're all familiar with them. And on here you see 4 elderly men, and they're sitting on this, with a background which is not a very up and happy kind of a background. And neither do these people look terribly happy. But of course, they've got each other and they're relaxed. They've discarded their shoes, and probably they're just being photographed. And what do you think? I don't think they look very much full of life. They don't look as if they've aged actively, but they have each other. They're not alone, at least. Whereas on the other side, you see this very happy, smiling elderly lady with another generation, probably 2 generations below her, and this bonding taking place in a background which is so exciting. It's probably a bangle shop that in itself shows that this person is well enough to come outside their house and be in touch with the surroundings, the people who are coming to buy, etc. And I would see this as an epitome of happy, healthy aging. Look how well-groomed this elderly lady is. And here's another scenario. You see in a park, many elderly people, they are disabled on this side. They've got disability aids. They've got, though this person is not very mobile, this person also needs a walker, etc. But they were able to come out. So despite their physical disabilities, they seem to be enjoying each other. Probably this person's hearing is not so good, and so she's leaning forward. But it's a nice park, and they're happy. And on this side, you see elderly people who are very healthy, who are not disabled. And they're also in a very nice environment. And they are interested in what this person is saying. They're not phased out, thinking of something else. They're very, very interested. So these are examples of active aging, the integration into society, connectedness, all the things that we would think would promote a healthy, active aging and a good lifestyle. So the United Nations, again, I keep going back to the United Nations because I'm so impressed that a world body which deals with governments and countries and their problems is also looking into the plight of the elderly. And they have to look into it because the number of older people is increasing astronomically. And in many of the developed countries, they have now more elderly people and a shrinking birth rate than they ever had before. And that poses a huge burden on society because they may not be able to be productive in a financial sense. So they have outlined, the United Nations or human rights, that from a negative perception of older persons, what is a negative perception? They're seen as less valuable to society. They are dependent on the younger generation. They're burden on the economy. They're weak and frail, and all these are right. Their judgment and decision-making should be deferred to others to protect them. So this is how we perceive elderly people, all negative. And they feel we should have a shift to older persons as rights holders. Can we think of them as active agents in society? Can we benefit from the skills, knowledge, and experience that they have in spite of the fact they may not have the physical ability to do things. So this could apply to people who have their cognitive functions are all right, their brain is all right. And of course, this would not be true for all elderly people, but this is true for people who are sound, who have aged actively, okay? And this is not to say that if you have dementia, it was a person's fault that they got dementia, certainly not. But this is a disease, and hopefully as time goes on, we will learn how to prevent some of these old age diseases. So this is the kind of a shift in perception that we should have as a civic society. In different countries, it will be in a different way, but the general, generic feeling should be that elderly are not a burden on society, and just because they're physically disabled doesn't mean that they cannot contribute anything. So, but what prevents the elder person from being well? Because again, this perception that they are worthless, not actively productive, and they do lose their peers, their friends, their spouses. So the question of loneliness comes in. Again, because of financial, they're not earning anything. They have to rely on old savings or their children, the poverty factor to a greater or lesser extent. And then because of diseases and aging, they will have pain, disability, and all this provokes fear, fear of the unknown. What is going to happen to me? I was so well before, now look what's happened. How do I prevent it? How far will it go? And then, of course, this is a very sad point, but because they are viewed as frail, worthless, they can be abused. A person who shows themselves as strong, shows themselves as having facilities and abilities, is very rarely abused. But people who look like the underdog, as elderly are considered now, they certainly are easier to abuse. So I thought, let us talk about different kinds of scenarios of how the elderly are seen in different settings, and through that bring out specific vulnerabilities which elderly people have. Now, I'm not going to really talk about the very ill, the bedbound and terminal kind of elderly person. I'm not going to talk about that. I think in the case presentation, we will hear more about that. But here I'm talking about people who are otherwise well, but are in different types of circumstances. So in this scenario, I'm thinking of a rural community, and this is something which I have experienced personally because I was once doing a research project in which I was gathering data on the problems of the elderly in rural communities and in urban communities. And so we were going house to house, myself and my team, and we came across this 60-year-old, rather elderly, frail lady, though 60 today, we would not call this was about 20 years ago scenario. I'm telling you, I'm sure it's still the same. And she was a widow, and she was doing her daily manual work, which was grazing the only asset that she had, which was a cow. And what was the reason why this lady at the age of 60, when she probably had back pain and joint pains, why did she have to go and do this back-breaking work of taking her cow for grazing? And that's because her children had migrated to the city for jobs. And we know this happens. We know how the rural-urban migration in poor communities is taking place because people want a better lifestyle. You cannot blame them. And when we came to her and we said we want to gather some data, she wept and she narrated these were all the things that she was suffering from. Lack of money, lonely, pain from her knees, arthritic knees, and a sense that she has just been abandoned by her family. So in this kind of a situation, how do we begin to help? Let's look at another situation of an urban upper class, the opposite. An 80-year-old couple with diabetes, heart failure, and dementia. And they live, both of them don't have this, they have a combination of these factors. And they live in a upper class retirement home. They have 2 children who live in the United States. This is a common scenario which I now come across as I've moved to a larger town. I'm in Coimbatore, and we do have many of these kind of problems. And when you talk to them, this is some of the narrative that is given. I slipped and fell. My wife is too weak to lift me up. And so though they're in a retirement home, that help is really quite inadequate. They're not able to look after each person, each family. Our children can see us every minute through a webcam in the living room and bedroom. And they send us money. So you would say, how fortunate. You know, they have people who can't physically be there, but they have taken the trouble to put a webcam. They have taken the trouble to, give them a nice place to live in, etc. But I wonder if some of you would think that there was something not quite right in that. And some of the things that I thought was, in this scenario, the disability is not being addressed. They didn't have any kind of support to improve their mobility, and so they fell. Falls are very, very dangerous and serious in elderly people, and as geriatricians, we must try our best to prevent the elderly from falling because it causes a sudden decline in their physical and mental health. And dependency, though they look as though they are independently living, they are still so dependent, and so they've lost their autonomy, which is a very important and vital part of any person's well-being. They are actually abandoned. And what they have is a new type of caring, which is like a virtual caring. So their children, which are living abroad, feel we have abandoned them, but let's try to do the best that we can by putting these cameras. But, there's a loss of privacy. Even if it's your children who are looking at you through a camera, I mean, you don't really want somebody 3,000 miles away, even if it is your child, to look at, to be, for you to be visible to them all times of the day or night, just because they want to care for you. So this is a peculiar scenario of the 21st century where this virtual caring and abandonment is going on side by side. So what is the solution to this, So one is we have to improve health services access. Why did this person fall? Because there are ways to prevent older people from falling, right from having grab rails in the bathroom to improving the flow, all kinds of things. We have to improve. And if something does happen, they have to improve the health services access. Home care services, so that their activities of daily living can be cared for. So if they are fallers and they cannot be trusted to go to the bathroom without falling, somebody has to help them. There has to be enough access to that. And then instead of just having retirement homes, of which we have plenty in India, for which you do have to pay a large amount of money, why not build long-term care homes which offer care for those who are dependent? Very few of the retirement homes actually do that. To live in a retirement home, you have to be quite able-bodied, and you must be able to be independent, to go to the dining rooms, etc. But we need long-term care facilities for the dependent elderly. I'm not saying there aren't, but we need more of them. So let's move on to the third scenario. And I hope that you will offer your own ideas about the scenarios that I'm giving up for you. So this is the third one. It's about an urban. Now this couple is very healthy, unlike the last couple who had a whole lot of comorbidities. So let's say this couple is in their 70s. They are retired high school teachers. That means they are well educated. And the only thing that the gentleman has is he has a hearing impairment, and the lady has arthritic leaks, and she does arthritic knees, and she does leak urine on and off. And this is a kind of a thing which any older person will have. When I say any older person, I mean an older person who looks otherwise healthy would have some of these, a combination of these problems. So they are living with their son and grandchildren and daughter-in-law, and they seem to have a very good family dynamics. And when they speak, their narrative is, we have everything we need, but there's always a but. What is that but? we are not able to connect with the grandchildren. Why can't you connect with the grandchildren? They're living right next to you. No, but they live in a different world. They have online classes. This was during the pandemic. They have phones, they have TV, and those things are much more interesting for them than the grandparents, because there's so much excitement coming out from those phones. And the older couple, not having been used to social media and phones, etc., in their younger days, they do not have that common interest that these younger children have. So they are disconnected. And whose fault is that? It is nobody's fault, and it is everybody's fault. Okay. So what happened to their son and daughter-in-law? Well, they are in the active, productive periods of their life, and they are extremely busy in their jobs. So the things that we can identify here, that there's a loss of purpose, these people are retired, they don't have anything, they are not connected to people. They may not have any peer group support, people outside whom they can rely on, so they have to rely on their families for social connectedness. And they are active, educated people suddenly left without purposeful, enjoyable activities. So you might say that this is better than all the other scenarios we've had, okay? Right. So even so, but it does not allow these otherwise healthy and educated people from having a good quality life which they feel happy about. So what are the solutions? Important. Though children are there, they can connect with them. We must have other ways of connecting. But what about connectedness outside in their friends, their community? If we improve that, an older person has a much richer life experience. Can we allow or make it? Can we help these elderly people to use the resources, the skills, the wisdom that they've had through a lifetime of working with young children? Can they participate in mainstream life? Why not? Can we make it convenient? Can we remember that there are these older people just because they are not actively taking classes in school? Does it mean that all their wisdom has gone? Can they not contribute? We have to think about that. And then we have to look within the family. We have to improve the family bonds so that people are not just living under one roof, but living parallel lives. How can we make that connectedness happen? So let's explore some of the issues that have come out from these scenarios. And one is, can the community participate in looking after the elderly? Phone-in services. If you know that there is a certain family which has certain problems, can somebody phone in and say, would you like anything to be done? We have, do you want your groceries to be bought? Can we offer you anything which you're not able to get? And then if they require help with activities of daily living, an organization which can provide home care services to come in daily, twice a week, maybe even 3 times a week. Now, this is something which definitely I have seen it happening in the developed countries, where a person who was totally disabled with a very serious disease called multiple sclerosis, she could not get up, she was incontinent. 3 times a day, community nurses went in and they gave her a bath, changed her diapers, made her sit in a chair, and gave her meals. They would come back again after 6 hours. And so we perhaps may not need this kind of intensive home care services, because those who have families, we have more people who live in families who can be trained to do these activities. But the state, the country found it cheaper to have these people looked after in the community through nurses rather than keep them in a hospital, just taking up hospital beds. And then, as I said, long-term care services. This is much cheaper, more effective, more conducive to a normal life. And then the peer support groups, if they can be elder-friendly parks, as we saw some in the pictures over there, if there are libraries, eateries, gymnasiums even, where normally we think only younger people will go, but we do know that gym and exercise is very important for elderly people to improve their muscle health. And then as I was talking about different generations, the intergenerational activities, people who are teachers, people who are just from mainstream life have much to impart to the children. Their storytelling, many different things, or maybe remedial learning. Students who are not doing well in class, can elderly people be co-opted into giving them little extra tuition, maybe at a cost, maybe as a remuneration. And then the public spaces and transport should be changed so that they're not obstacles to elderly people, so that the elderly can confidently walk out and on a pavement without fear of falling because of jutting out bricks or obstructions. Can they get into a bus? Today, if you try to get into a bus, it's so high, older person cannot lift their leg up, and then they usually fall or bang their head or something like that. So if it can be made low floor buses, more convenient. And I think the Western world has done a lot because they have to do it, because they have at least 20% of their people are elderly, where immediately people get up if there's an older person, and there's areas reserved for the elderly. We don't have any of that. And so we can look at what has already been done. We don't have to discover the wheel anew. Look at that and see how much of that we can incorporate. It's hard in a country that has got so many priorities, but we need to start somewhere. And then health services. They don't have to be related to a hospital. We are only used to hospital-based medical services. Can we have community-based medical services geared specifically to elderly people? And then we come to improving the financial wealth. That's, as I said, poverty is one of the reasons why elderly people cannot age actively. Unless you have money, you cannot eat all the lovely foods that they talk about for active aging. They say eat foods with antioxidants. Fruits are expensive. Nuts, they're expensive, So older person has to be a little well off to access to these. And then there should be mandatory old age pension for all, because it may be there in the government sectors, maybe there in private companies. But what about the informal sector or the person who's self-employed? There are schemes. It's not that there are no schemes. For example, National Pension Scheme is there. And even maids who work as domestic help in a house can be enrolled into those. There's an Atal pension for widows and for informal sector. We as people who are more well off could find out about these things and help our less fortunate people who come across us. And then there is this Maintenance of Parents and Senior Citizens Act of 2007. This is an Indian act purely, where children cannot abandon their parents. They can be taken to court if they do not sustain them and maintain them. Again, food and medicines to be given on a subsidized basis for elderly, and then a way to deal with their finances, better banking schemes. Nowadays, we have internet banking. You have to remember, you have to be very agile mentally. I find it so difficult. You must have your phone next to you. The OTP will come within a certain specified period. You have to enter that OTP. Otherwise, finished. You cannot do. So an elderly person with poor eyesight, poor arthritic fingers, maybe not so good cognition, will not be able to do net banking. So we need to look into all these and make it more elder friendly. Here is an example of peer groups, how to form. And this is Help Age India. They have 875 senior citizens associations where 5 to 6 like-minded senior citizens can meet at least once in a week. So the older person is looking forward the whole week. When am I going to meet these other like-minded citizens? And they choose an activity, a common interest. They form a book club or just playing indoor games, chess, etc. And they provide during this process, there is crosstalk, there's sharing of information, sharing of their depressions, anxieties, their successes, and it gives them a much better feeling about themselves. So I've taken quite a bit of your time now, and so I would like to conclude to leave you with these thoughts so that it will provoke, I hope, some discussion among yourselves. Is whenever we come across a difficult situation regarding the elderly, we have to identify the problem first. We have to do some hard thinking. and consultations to find proper solutions. Solutions cannot be found unless we identify the problems. And these solutions should be such that they, of course, will be applicable to that particular person in that particular context, but they should also then be extrapolated to become generic, so that can we use what we learned here as a general principle for all elderly where possible. And then, of course, it is the community. We cannot have a central organization somewhere saying, like HelpAge India. HelpAge India cannot function if it says from their central body, do this, do that. They must fall back on their community support basic and say, in your community, what do you think will work? So it has to be more decentralized, and local people have to see how they can help themselves. But we do also need to move the government to recognize elder needs. And India formed its national policy for older persons rather late, almost 10 years after the United Nations Charter on Older People. That was 1990, and India formed their policy on older persons in 1999. But whatever it is, our country does have a national policy, and based on that, many things have been done. Not enough, but at least there is an awareness in the Department of Social Justice that elderly are an important group. And as a nation where almost now 10% and rising part of the population is above the age of 60, the absolute numbers, because of a large population, comes to about 100 million, which is many, many times the total population of countries like Australia, 5 times the whole population of Australia, maybe twice the whole population of the UK. So we have a huge burden of elderly people. And how do we give cost-effective solutions which are generic to the whole population? So thank you, friends, for your patient listening, and I would like to end here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam. You have given us variety. Your 3 cases gave us like physical issue, financial issue, and last but not the least, psychological issue. Everything has to be weighed appropriately. For situation 3, that psychological issue is the most thing. As you said, they had everything. But that not having the psychological balance tips everything off. You have money. Will money bring you everything? It's not. And then exactly true, your situation 2 of privacy and intimacy cannot be broken. So just money can, exactly like all of us have parents. So for example, my dad used to say, just by giving money, everything cannot be solved. The person who is having the money, they can have the money. So these are all personal issues. We have to give importance. And the next thing, last very important thing is, nowadays, everyone knows there are many problems. They say, don't come with problems, come with solutions. If there's a problem, we know very well that problem exists. Okay, you want something to be done? Come up with a solution. Let us see if we can all work together and get that going. So I would say like everyone in this platform, you have to take everything in. For example, all those 3 situations are very important, and look into it. How would you like to solve? Each one of us may have different views, and together we may get multiple options. As I said, not one solution, multiple solutions. And as madam said that she's with the time constraint, Senior, can we go ahead with the case presentation and then have the discussion together, or what would you prefer, madam?
I leave it up to you. I leave it up to you entirely. I think that case
presentation... Like how long will you be free, madam?
I think I can go on till this session goes on for how long? 2 hours?
No, an hour and a half.
Yeah, I think I might be able to stretch it.
Okay then. So in that case, will all of you be happy to go ahead with the case presentation, and then together we will have the discussion.
Thank you, ma'am. Today we are going to have a case presentation by Ms. Sunita. Sunita, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm here. Good evening.
I will be sharing your case presentation.
Sure.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, my case presentation is based on an experience that I'm having right now working with someone. So the person is 86 years old, female, diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and has a history of COPD, and has retired from the government service. The medical history is that the person has a long history of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, that is COPD. In 2018, due to some issues, pacemaker was implanted, which is supported, and the patient is 100% on the pacemaker. Recently, the person was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and the medication was started for that. Her age-related hearing impairment is almost 85%. So she wears the hearing aid for which the hearing loss is up to 85% and plus. The spinal bones MRI shows an acute case of bone degeneration. Eyesight has deteriorated in the past 2 years since the COVID to the extent of being unable to read, though both eyes have been operated for cataract issues earlier in her life. Since 2021, her speech has started deteriorating drastically, limiting her communication with others. On medical consultation with the doctors, which is happening only through online forum these days because the patient is completely bedridden and has a need for a full-time support of a nurse. All the food that she takes is well smashed and ground well because the person cannot eat otherwise and is unable to communicate any need. The diagnosis is that the person is unable to converse or unable to get her thoughts, but the family is aware of her limitations in mobility and her speech due to various health issues. Prognosis, again, unable to converse or unable to get her thoughts. Family is aware of the degenerative nature of the disease. The patient is very vocal through verbal sounds and non-verbal gesture when she's in discomfort. Family is doing everything to ensure she is able to live a normal lifestyle and is not completely bedridden, though technically she is a bedridden patient. They get her onto the wheelchair as often as possible. The picture that I have drawn of the family tree is from her parents' side. She had 8 siblings, of which 3 of them are dead. The one sister is sick. And the reason I drew this is because she was very, very close to her siblings. And they all are married with their own family. She herself has 3 kids. And she is now with one of the daughter, who's supporting her and taking care of her. A very social person, therefore the echo map, I have included the patient and her family. And it is all about her interaction, social interactions is where I have to try to show. Her, if you notice that most of the interactions, ties are very strong, very social person. Whether the interaction was with the children, 3 children that she had, or with the siblings or her friends. She was a government servant, so therefore with her colleagues, acquaintance, religious interactions, everything, the ties are very strong. But as on date, they're all disrupted because she's unable to speak. The socioeconomic overview is that the patient is comfortably placed in a sufficiently lighted room for herself and her nurse. It has an attached balcony and a toilet too. This room is part of the penthouse which the family is occupying. She is a pensioner and is able to support her medical expenses to an extent. Her children support her financially for all her other needs. She is not isolated, but gets to meet with rest of her immediate family members, like just right now what we heard. She is able to meet with her grandchildren. But since speech and muscle control is impaired to a great extent, the interactions are not at all meaningful. She had a good relationship with her siblings, friends, and other relatives. She's always liked to interact with others, a very social person, but since the speech is affected now to a great extent, the interactions have greatly been restricted to a maximum of maybe a 1 video call per week or twice in 2 weeks. She's unable to communicate any of her needs, but has been provided with a hospital-style bed and 2 wheelchairs, and her daughter is managing all her affairs. The patient, a psychological overview is that the patient is not engaging as she is unable to communicate intelligently with anyone due to the speech impairment. Her interactions with the outer world has been reduced drastically. from going out for a stroll to nil. This has made her very sad and hasn't been showing an interest to exercise or to engage with anyone. She used to be generally happy to meet people, which hasn't been possible since the onset of COVID and the society's low patience and interest in interacting with someone like her. The total pain, as we see, is that physical pain, lack of mobility, multiple faculty impairment, persistent cough due to the COPD, psychologically acute sense of loneliness due to the inability to interact with others, unable to accept the present state of health. Socioeconomic, financially stable, has dedicated nurse, limited to nil social interactions, which is due to the speech impairment and mobility issues. Spiritual, strong faith in God and religious practices, but still unable to interact with outside world for religious functions. So the discussion point is because as I look at the case, I feel that the person was very socially interactive person and today is unable to do that. So how does the present state of health impact the general well-being of the patient? The second question that I'm putting up to the group is the immediate family being unrealistic in making the bedridden patient go through a daily routine of an able person? Like what I see is that the person is put on the wheelchair at least twice a day. For most part of the day, she's sitting there unless she's sleeping. They put her back on the bed. Like she has a daily bath in the bathroom. So are they being very unrealistic in making the patient go through this kind of routine? Question 3 is, could the patient's present situation lead to an emotional draining of the well-being of the primary caregiver? In this case, it's the daughter. If it is a yes to the above question, what suggestions can be given for the family's welfare? How can we help the family to accept the reality of the patient's health condition and take a balanced view of the situation? Thank you very much. That's my case presentation.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you. And like you have covered a lot, and then all your discussion points are worth discussion with many ideas from one and all. So as we always say, either they can type in the chat or go ahead and unmute and ask. And I would ask Dr. Alka Madam to give her opinion first and take it from there.
It would be nice if somebody who's got a burning question or comment
yes,
to say that
come up. Yes, yes, madam. We will wait for the comments and then we can add on our points at the end.
Yes.
Yes, I would also agree with you, madam. So like in whoever wants either to type in the chat or unmute and ask, we can go one by one. You could just say with the discussion points, whatever is mentioned. We can take the first one, and how does the present state of health impact the general well-being of the patient? What would be the comments for that first?
Well, what I see today is what Dr. Alka Ganesh has given us as what we call a bouquet of information to deal with our elderly. Sunita has managed to bring the right kind of a case presentation which accommodates all the characteristics that needs to be addressed with the care, professionalism, as well as values that go with the palliative care. Now, I think this is a wonderful day today, I would say, that this coincidence of the information dealing with the elderly and the elderly case has coincided together. And we have a lot of people who are eagerly waiting to bring in their thoughts. And these thoughts, I suppose, will be a helpful assistance to what we gain from this session today.
Thank you very much. As you said, yes. What would your thought be? Would you think that the present state of health impact for this particular patient What would your opinion be for the first question?
And the patient is a very, very dependent person. Every activity has to be helped. So naturally, I think, and she can't tell her problems. She cannot communicate, which is extremely frustrating for any person. So I would say that this person...
Communication aids might come handy here, isn't it? Because she was a well-trained person.
Before.
And if you teach her something with a communication aid, we have so many voice aid, type aid, so many things are there.
Exactly, yes.
I was in one of the lectures given in this platform only, I was told that those things are available now in India also.
Of
so
course,
that
Parkinson's, even hand movements, etc., may be difficult. She seems to be in a very advanced stage of Parkinson's or Parkinson's plus, and they could have such severe rigidity.
Yes.
But, even if her voice is not there, it would be even harder for her to type anything. So, yes. So then the carer has to give many options. Would you like to have this or would you like to have that? And then they can point to something. I saw a set of nurses in the UK who, to a totally blind person, said, would you like your blue blouse or would you like the red blouse? Now, to me, it seemed rather incongruous for a blind person to be asking this, but it made that person answer. She said, no, I think I like the red one today. So you see, we do not know, we cannot judge what will help a person. So if they can't communicate, let's give them some options. But when you look at from the carer side, it's so draining because it takes time, to say all these things. But that's just an idea. I wonder if anyone else has any other ideas of how you would deal in this
touch and feel helps, madam.
Yes.
So as you have said, yes, there are very many ways. See, when one option is not possible, we will have to start to think. So normally touch and feel for them, you can tell them, even with clothes, they will have different texture and things. So that can be helpful. And especially with this lady, her life has turned 360 from how she was to how she is. So tailor making individual aids which can help her, because draining her and down as we come, draining her and draining the carer will cause more harm to her down the line. So that is one thing. And somebody has typed something on the chat. Let me read that also. Want to know how to deal with elderly who do not accept the fact that all bodies deteriorate with time, and how to help them take it in a positive manner.
Oh, where is that session?
No. Here it's in. I'll read it, madam.
No, the chat box here. Does it say that what you read out just now?
Yes. They are in the chat box. I'm reading from the chat box.
Okay,
only, madam. Because there are some more ahead also. Let me read that also.
There's one about very interesting one about beyond talking. Do you believe being able to deep connect and communicate with the patient through eye contact, kind touch, showing love, and being present? Actually, this is something which is so it is so wonderful, because it is the attitude of the carer. Just putting your hands around the shoulder and a pleasant smile, and trying to show that I'm not really busy. I woke up this morning only to be with you. And the reverse may be true. Actually, that person's got a lot of activities to do. But if you can show this older person that you're only there for that person, it makes them feel very good. But it's very hard to do unless you actually, that attitude is ingrained. So I think many of these things come from, and I was just from an ability to love the older person. So I was just talking to a friend of mine today and saying that I was in touch with a doctor, and I said, why did you take up geriatrics? Because, it seems like a kind of a dead end thing. This was some centuries ago before I actually learned about geriatrics. And she said, no, I find them so lovable. They're so nice. They need such help. It brings out all my maternal instincts. So I think even paternal instincts can come out. So I think it's the carer it's hard for the carer to give so much of themselves. But if they could somehow, if it could come out naturally and show that, the gestures are more than 1,000 words, So yes, there is something we have to all do to like older people. What is that magic? I don't know.
No, it's to come from within. It's not difficult, madam. We have for example, I would say we were all gifted to be with grandparents, and even today I have so many things what my grand has taught. But which has kept me too long.
But the pace of life is such now that each person has so many other things to do. I remember those days when our family, you had to light the coal fire. It took hours to do that. Today, do we do that? Just click and the gas comes on.
One button.
We do so many other things in that time. So an average person doesn't have. So it becomes much harder, but it has to be done. And obviously, one person is not enough. If you have a group of people, again, these are all difficult things, but if you can just keep in mind, yes, that we need to bring that attitude in first, and then other things could follow.
Yes, love and affection has to be inculcated. And one thing I would like to say, see, if you are very lovable and affectionate to the elderly person, you're telling that you're going to spend the whole day or something with them, then they will tell, no, you have spent some time, you go do your work. They will automatically tell that. I have heard that from them. So once you say that you're willing to do things for them, it will be, they will also, it's a mutual thing. Everything is mutual. From that point of view, as you say, that eye contact, everything, love, touch, everything will matter. And for the next one, how to deal with elderly who do not accept the fact that all bodies deteriorate with time, and how to help them take it up. See, for example, I would just say an example which I say, madam, you could enhance on top of it. See, for example, I say nowadays everyone has a mobile phone. Why do all of you change a mobile phone in 2 years' time? Why don't you have it for 20 years? Everyone changes the phone max 2 years or 4 years, because that much only it works. So like that, so this is a common example. I've been telling this for the last 10 years to my patients, and everyone says, oh, why didn't we think like that? So like that, everything has wear and tear. So not to tell that, not to be offended that if a small gadget has that, a human body has got so much of things within which no one is unable to reproduce something like that. So that also, that wear and tear takes 80 years, whereas your phone 2 years you're giving up. So compare that. It has been so good for 75 years. So it's just the denial or unacceptance. Once you explain things, people will be able to agree and understand. You give me examples. But when you're 25. Go ahead, madam.
No, but there is an answer here by Shiba Tase. Ergonomical environment changes can make them feel better. So I think this is a huge area of, should be a huge area of research, so that elderly people, even if they do not have the wherewithal physically to do things, the appliances given to them should be such that the function can happen, even though they can't do it. So for example, a person who's got very badly deformed fingers and they want to cook or they want to eat, so the spoon and fork has to be made. They may not be able to eat with their hands, but the spoon and fork could be ergonomically fashioned so that it's easy to bring it to the mouth, so that sometimes you have the spoon end changed like this at a right angle, so that they don't have to change their hand movements. Similarly, many other aids are now available, but I find that in India, we don't, either they're not available or we don't know about them, or we feel it's an added expense. Is it really going to work? But I think we should go all out and make these things, this information available, and the products themselves available for elderly design people. And how about, I don't know, I would like to know from the audience here, what do they think about robots for older people? There are these cuddly toys. That's in the we read all this in the West. Is it applicable to us to have a cuddly little dog, which is actually a robot? I somehow would not like it at all. First of all, I'm not a dog lover, but similar to that, could they talk to Alexa? Some of us now are talking a lot to Alexa, which is an awful thing. But Alexa seems to know a lot of things and can, help us to find some TV programs, etc. But working on from that line, can a robot, what do you think? Others who have contributed, some who have not, like Mr. Gautam and Genevieve and Siju, etc. What do you think of having a robot help an older person to communicate or to do things for them or to make them happy? Mushiba Tassin has written something. Yes, Mushiba.
I will come to that. Like, we'll wait for people to answer your question. And I thought once that's done, for that, we will go into that. And regarding the ergonomics, there are even just handles, thicker handles. Nothing more than that. Thicker handle or with a wooden connection, so that because dexterity might be lost by elderly. So for that, this changing the side, right, left, all those are there. On top of that, just thickening the handle helps a lot with elderly. So those type of things are available, madam. In fact, for one of my family, extended family, we did use that because she was not very old, 70 plus. She couldn't use in Chennai. I remember getting, but I'm not sure whether it was got from Chennai or from somewhere. We did buy it online and give it for her because she couldn't eat by herself. So this spoon helped her.
And it was useful. So like that, we can
yes,
many other points.
There is some time. For some time, it was useful, and then she needed more assistance.
And at least she was independent till that time. But there is another thing here about Sarita Kaveri.
I'll read, madam. Yeah. My mother-in-law had no balance. That is very common. I have one history also in family. My mother-in-law had no balance, but would refuse to use a walker. So does her sister. They feel it a stigma. Yes, definitely. I have my own aunt. I bought her a walker. She never used, she had a fall, she had fracture of the vertebra. But even then, see, the stigma is very, very personal. When she had the fall, my aunt used it for like 2 months. And then back again, she will hold the wall and walk, but she will not use the walker.
So could you find some way of telling her that the walker was her friend? Were you able
yes, I have tried convincing her many, many times. When she had the fall and injury, that 2 months she did use it completely.
Yes. But what I find is that society is a part of this problem. The family, whenever I prescribe a walker and I call the physiotherapist and I say, please teach this person to use the walker properly, what the family members object themselves. They say, all that is not required. I am there to help her. No, she can hold my hand. So she'll get used to it. In Tamil, they say, Parakamaido. So the patient also says, I will get used to it. There's no question of I will get used to it. You have to get used to it and don't see it as something which is your...
No, that's what. See,
I will say... friend. So there has to be a constant narrative telling them, this is a nice thing to use. This is going to help you. But how you do it, I have not found an answer. I'm sure somebody in the group has found an answer.
Madam. My gran used it for 2 years. She had a fall. 2 years, she used it completely. She lived in Trichy where the house was not even one level. She was so well planned. She will put the walker ahead of her when the level is different.
So what changed?
No. My aunt didn't use, but my gran used. So it is different. It's personality, I would say. We have to keep on.
Yeah. I also think that it is a trend, that there's a trend in our country that we are here to support you. Whereas you see in the Western population, no, I don't want support. I'm independent. That question of independence has to come into our psyche. And so I was amazed when I went for the first time to the US. I remember it was in Chicago. And how these old ladies with walkers and shopping bags, the light went on when they put their walker on, all the cars stopped on the 6 lanes and very slowly they went across the road and everybody respected them because they knew if they knocked down an old lady, they're going to be behind bars for a long time. So, the older people had that power because the state gave them that power. And the roads are made such so that they cannot walk. Now, we cannot expect all that to happen overnight in our country, but we can do it. So at least if everybody says, where is your walker? Can I get your walker? And families of the elder people say, no, here is your prized possession. This is your friend. I'll be next to you. I think it is something which all of us have to do. And I agree with you that when I have to use a walker, I will think, oh, I lived so many years without a walker. Now, why do I need? I've taught people to use walker. Why do I need? I know that will happen. So these are all these personal things, but we have to get around it.
Yes, he has mentioned being a physiotherapist, it is very difficult to explain families about their system. Yes, it is a challenge. It is a challenge. And we have to keep on telling. And then, like, we have to tell the positive points, but by being independent, it's good for you. It's a little bit of pep talk, I would say, to convince them that by helping yourself, you're going to help others also. It is really a challenge only.
But maybe Mashiba could tell us, have you,
that's all.
Are you able to sort out the problem? Have you found some people listening to certain kinds of encouragement? Then we can all use that.
Exactly. Someone like physiotherapist, if you could enlighten us.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah, I am the physiotherapist here. So I have been handling geriatric people. Actually, during this COVID lockdown, before that, they were a little active. And in this COVID lockdown, they were bound to be at home. They were not supposed to go out. And this lockdown, everything was like their physical activity level had dropped drastically. And after that, they went into a comfort zone where they now they don't want to come out of their own room. So they are into that comfort zone and they think like, oh, I'll walk till the bathroom and come back. That is okay. And when I tell them like, okay, now we are, because one of them, they had a fall and they had a fracture of hip. And after that, they started using the walker and the doctors have advised her for a walker. And the doctors have even told her like, you can take the walker later. But what she thought was after 1 month, she said, I am able to stand, so I can leave the walker. I said, no, it is not like that. We need the muscle strengthening to take place. And since you are age person, and she's after that, the family members are asking me, how can you call her at age? She's only 70 years. So she is only 70. How can you call her? She's a geriatric people. I said, okay, fine. Let her get her muscle strength, and then we can wean off the walker slowly. But it will take a long time. And they don't have that patience. Every day they keep asking me, when will she come out of the house? When will she come out of the house?
So you see, this thing is an impediment. It is seen as a temporary thing. So it is, society has to understand that these are not impediments. These are enhancing the ability of the older person. So it is a different kind of an approach. And certainly we will not wean off somebody because a person is not going to really improve that much, may at least maintain the certain level. Yes. And so do we have any other, do we move on to the next question? I'm particularly interested, madam, if you would agree, to the last one. Would you agree? If yes to the above question, what suggestions can be given for the family welfare? How can we help the family to accept the reality of the patient's health condition and take a balanced view of the situation? Is that what you were saying, Ms. Mashiba, that the family is in sort of a denial about the age factor itself, about the diseases that they have, and that sooner or later, with all this wonderful improvement of that we're having in medicine, why can't this person also do it? Completely forgetting that age is an important barrier towards improvement, which is slower. So this family, I got the feeling from these questions that they were trying to do beyond what was the capacity of the patient. I hope you will enlighten me on that. For could the situation, is the immediate family being unrealistic in making the bedridden patient go through a daily routine of an able person, putting the patient on a wheelchair for one? I don't think they're being unrealistic. I thought that they were being very caring, and they were certainly mobility. If a person can sit up, they can be taken out, see the environment. The only people who must not be forced to sit up are people who have low blood pressure when they sit up. That's detrimental to them. People who are unconscious, of course, cannot be made to sit up. And people who are so frail that sitting up causes a whole lot of, dizziness, and even if their blood pressure is maintained. All other people, if they're not in very severe pain, there is no harm in encouraging them. Now, there's one thing here that I would like to add. It's a very difficult aspect, and that is, when do we decide that a person is terminal? A terminal patient doesn't have to have muscle strengthening, doesn't have to have something which will prolong their life. If they're terminal, we have to accept the fact that they're terminal, but we must not abandon them. We have to take care of their bodies and to the nutrition as much as they can take it. No heroic methods. No, they should not have a bed sore. They should be kept clean. Those things should be there. But do they have to have increase in muscle strength? Do they have to do all the things that will be helpful to you for a prolonged life? No. But this is a problem. What do you mean by terminal illness? And if you take one definition, it is somebody who is unlikely to live more than 6 months. But that definition was made by insurance companies because they were interested in the length of time that they would have to pay out. So you could have a terminal illness and last for 9 months or 1 year, but certainly not for 5 years. You can't be in terminal illness for 5 years. So what we're trying to say here is that a person who has a disease for which they've had all the treatment, and it is unlikely from the medical opinion that they will improve further, and forcing them then to do many activities is a denial of their terminal status. So I have had an experience of that where somebody known to me had had strokes, had had severe heart failure where he could not breathe even on an oxygen, but he was being forced by his family to get up and use the walker and walk. No, this person is severely disabled, is not likely to live more than 6 months. Even if your prediction is proved wrong, it doesn't matter. But this person's unable to do those activities, and they must be looked after as a terminal illness. So the whole goals of treatment are quite different from someone who is likely to live for many years in an incapacitated situation. That person has to be given physiotherapy. That person has to be made to do many activities, and nutrition has to be balanced. So if a terminal patient doesn't want to eat, can't eat, we do not put a rice tube, because that is an unnatural kind of a thing. But it's not that it's a completely hard and fast. Here is where judgment is considered. Some people may need, even if they're terminal, to have a rice tube. But the goal has to be slightly different. So, it's a complex situation, and we have to just think about on an individual basis what we can do. So here I thought this lady was just unable to communicate, and was, of course, severely physically disabled because of a Parkinson's disease. So I would agree that she could be given all this loving care and help. I don't know. What do you all feel? What do the other people feel?
I would also agree with Madam, because if they are more bedbound, they'll be in more pain. So immobile itself can cause pain. But only thing we have to see, many times, even though communication is difficult with her, we normally say we can teach them few things to tell that if she's in pain, to raise the right hand, if she's comfortable, to raise the left hand. And like that, we can give her few suggestions and then ask her if she's comfortable with what we are doing, so that we are giving dignity and priority to her. So if she says she cannot or she doesn't, then we can reduce. Otherwise, daily care is always better, avoids bed sores, reduces pain. The benefits will be equally good. And for the fourth question, I have a small suggestion or question to the presenter. You said her close family, only one person was, that is her siblings, one person was sick. Just a suggestion, because the only daughter is looking after all the time. If her siblings, someone is younger to her, if they are close by, because she may have some better emotional connection with them. So if that is possible, maybe that person could come around 1 or 2 days in a week, so that to give her some emotional and psychological support. That is one thing which came up, because if the daughter, because we always say we have to give respite for the carers also. We normally give some option and see how much it's possible and all. Every situation has its own financial, its own particular social, cultural things to be considered. So that, if it's possible, could be considered, so that it gives some respite for the daughter. Something else is on the chat. Let me see.
Yes, I think your view was expressed. Very important that all siblings pitch in to look after the elderly. Yes.
Siblings can't physically come, but video calls help. Okay, whatever is possible, it always has to be shared. This is just, it's one of my personal opinion. For any parent or sibling or everything has to be shared. One person going through everything is a very unfair situation. If that is taken well, it's a blessing. Anything else? Anybody else would want to suggest, raise opinion or anything like that? Please do. Vulnerability of elderly is a very, very important thing, madam, because it's just loosely taken. Many don't even like awareness and things are very important. The elderly feeling what they have toiled all their life. It's due respect they need, has to be understood and managed appropriately.
There's one comment here. I think in our society, which is very people-centric, machines in the present elderly generation may be alienating them. Is this Sunita Berry? Did you mean the comment about
yes. Yes, that was my comment about the robots. Because
could you enlighten us?
Sure. So what happened, I think, compared to the West, where I have been to the US and to some of the Western countries, and I find that basically the independence that they value, the elderly value, is much higher. I'm not saying our elderly don't value, but just look at the way retirement. The moment we hit an age, there's an entitlement feeling. Most elderly will feel, oh, I have retired now, so people must care for me. I'm not saying that everyone is, but generally, like the daughter-in-law has to care, or the children have to care. So we have to fight against that, for at least for ourselves. There's a lot of learning, even as we all are going through that place of being that elderly. We are all going towards that. So in our present generation, if you're going to just give them machines, India is very, very people-centric. We want people around us. We have so many people around us. So that will only make them feel as if we're pushing them towards loneliness. A few years back, there was no video call opportunity. There was no WhatsApp. There was no Zoom calls, which is so freely available. But do our elderly really appreciate that? Oh, my children are calling me on Zoom. No, they would still like to see them next to them. They would still like the grandchildren next to them. So giving machines, that's my personal feeling. I just thought that maybe just giving them machines may not really, in our culture.
I do agree with you that there's nothing like having the person there. And in the West, it came as a necessity to have these cuddly toys and things like that. But I think that we are moving towards that with the nuclear family, with the migration to from rural to urban. I think we can't reject it outright, but don't impose on it just because it's there. I take your point that it is very much better to have a live human being next to you as far as possible. But on the side, Alexa can also be useful.
No, I just wanted to share an example of an elderly. Can I take a minute?
Well taken. Yeah, please do.
Totally right.
Yeah, there was this elderly people who were moved to a retirement home. I like the distinction that Alka ma'am made right now about the care home and the elderly retirement home. So in the West, retirement home works well. So this family couple moved to the retirement home, left their village where they were used to seeing their siblings. This is in Kerala. So they moved to some retirement home. And within no time, they told the children that we can't survive here. They said because they felt very alienated. They said they felt very lonely, even though they were with people of their own age. They were cared for. The food was there. Physiotherapy was there. Nurse was there. So the children would feel that everything is provided for. But this couple felt they were better off in their own home and they moved back. Now, it is definitely person to person. We cannot generalize and say everybody would do that. But those are things as an Indian community we have to consider.
At this point, I would just like to say, I think someone would have told about the book called Being Mortal.
It's not working.
Are you all aware of, there is a book called Being Mortal, okay, worth reading by Dr. Atul Gawande. Exactly what our topic discussion came today. See, when you see sometimes we feel the security or safety of the elderly is important. At that point of time, we don't see their personal view and wishes. Exactly all what we have discussed today, it's all of you, it's worth reading that book. It's called Being Mortal by Dr. Atul Gawande, in which he will say, the whole world has gone through all this. So initially they started having retirement homes and things where only safety. Then they thought that everyone left the place. This happened in the 60s. Then after that, they started having some homes where they had some pigeons. That is not the elderly were not looking after. They had some common place. Then the elderly started taking that to their self, and then they started helping garden, pets. So each one will have different. Someone won't like pet. For, as madam said, I will see a dog do everything, but to have a pet, I don't fancy that. Okay. My daughter has pets. Everyone has pets, but I will not have. So like that, but each one has different. So we have to incorporate many things into it. So if you all get a chance to read that book, all these were tried. And then finally they saw which is the best, like best of both, as we say. You have to see what will cater. Safety and care is important. At the same time, happiness of the individual is also important. So we have to mix and match. That's where the difficulty comes. Whereas if you have a management, as madam said, everyone in India, like so many homes and things are coming, they all want them to buy. Because one inmate told me this recently. She's telling she's a single person, it seems, so she doesn't want to buy, she wants to stay. But she's unable to do that because every promoter wants her to buy. So there will be many things. We have to find which, that's why tailor make everything to your need. It may not be easy. Nothing comes easy, okay? But we have to try and see what's possible. So all these issues are there. Always we look at safety, but safety alone will not satisfy everything. So we have to find which is safe. And especially as we have all had today, human beings will, okay, gadgets, Alexa is there. Alexa, sometimes you say you put English music, it will play Spanish music. It may do, not that it doesn't do always. So like that, it has its own benefit. I'm not against gadgets. Without gadgets, we won't do this talk. Today, we are all on Zoom. So we have to know the right balance. We need the gadget, we need everything, but we need to have that personal touch also. That is what ultimately, isn't it? Love, touch, kindness is what sustains, or that is what wins, finally. So we have to find the right balance, I would say, in both. We can't say one is the best and the other one is the worst. So that book is just, it's called Being Mortal, and it's by Dr. Atul Gawande. It was some Booker Prize winning book. 2014, I think it came. And I have read that few times and I've recommended it to many people. In one of our talks, someone mentioned also. So I thought, okay, it's worth reading. All of you give it a go. Everything, like the first 100 to 200 pages or 100 pages, at least if you see, all important points which we see in palliative care, explaining the importance of deterioration in health, what happens when someone hits 70, because no one accepts it, because no one is aware of it. It's not a gradual decline. It is a steep fall. So it can be different types. All that is mentioned in that. So it's not only for us, it's a worthful read for many public also. So I have recommended, and many who have read it have all felt really useful one. So all of you can give it a go if you find one.
Thank you, Radha ma'am, and thank you, Alka ma'am, for that wonderful session and also the case presentation and case discussion. Both of you made it very, very memorable and a very useful session. Thank you so much. And I have shared the feedback link with you all. Radha ma'am, I know you have another session at 4:30. That's why we are letting you go now. Thank you all for joining us today. I will see you on the next session. Bye-bye.
Thank you, one and all. A big thank you, Dr. Alka.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.